hello everyone. So to many of us, I guess, Francis Dipper, the name is known from probably the two best known and most accessible books on fish identification, Marine Fishes of Wales and British Sea Fishes, which Francis was a joint project with Robert Irving, who I know some people here will know. But she's also written various other books and has had other strands to her career in consultancy, and particularly in engaging with people, with schools, and she also ran, back in the good old days of adult education, several marine-based courses in the East Anglia area. She tells me now that she's retired, although I know she still makes regular contributions to British wildlife, particularly in the excellent wildlife report section at the end of the monthly journal on marine records. So with that, otherwise, Francis, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Robin. I'd forgotten about those very early days. It seems a long time ago now. And as you say, in theory, I'm retired, but so I'm only writing 2 books at the moment. It keeps me fairly busy. Okay, right, we're on. Okay, identifying fish and looking at them on the shore, something I absolutely love to do. And this slide is one of the most favourite places I've been to, which is up in Scotland, just off the Isle of Mull. And that's the sort of shore I like to see if I want to go and look for intertidal fish. Very low tide, extensive mixed rocks and sediment, and also ability to wade into the water a little way as well. Gives you a lot of variety and choice. But I thought during the presentation, this is more or less what I'd quite like to cover. Basically, what are intertidal fish, shore fish? Why on earth would you want to live on the shore, and how do they manage it? How to find them in the first place, identifying them, of course, and then assuming we've got time and it all works out, we'll have a little practice. So I've set up a few slides for you to have a go at, and at that stage we'll turn our mics on and all the rest of it, and you can see how you can do on it. So what do we mean by intertidal fish? I would say from my various readings and work that you've got about 45 species of what I would call permanent residents. So these are fish that spend most of their life on the shore. Some of them may spawn there as well, so they spend their whole lives on the shore, except when they're perhaps larvae, or they live and they grow on the shore, but they actually spawn offshore. So those are permanent. And Alwyn Wheeler, who was the man of fish a number of years ago, reckons that there were about 45 to 50 species of these. Then you've got the temporary residents, so you've got at least 10 species of those, and these would only be coming onto the shore as juveniles, mainly for protection, just swimming in and settling as juveniles, but moving away again once they start growing. And what I call waifs and strays. So basically fish that stayed too late at the party, so they didn't go back out with the tide, because a number of fish swim in and out with the tide, or they get washed in by storms and trapped in rock pools and so on. So I'll see if I can show you an example of each of those as we go along. So there you go. This is a beautiful little Connemara clingfish, which Julia Nunn photographed in Ireland. And she picked up this oyster shell, possibly in a pool, I think it was. And there's a little clingfish with its young, with its eggs, developing eggs, basically. So that one is a permanent resident living on the shore and laying its eggs there as well. The temporary residents, you might count something like the juvenile flatfish. So it's quite common to catch juvenile flatfish and this is only about an inch across, this one, it's pretty small, in sandy pools on the lower shore or in the shallows of the lower shore. Okay, you're not going to find a great white shark, I don't think, in a rock pool, but I have found sharks washed in and trapped in rock pools after particularly low spring tides. And you can see in the bottom of those two photos, lesser spotted cat shark with the red arrow there. And this was again up in Scotland. The tide had gone out a considerably long way, and it basically just got stuck in this rock pool. So you never know quite what you might find. I'd be interested to know later on, what's the strangest thing any of you have ever found in a rock pool? It doesn't have to be a fish. Now, why would you live there? It's a difficult environment. It gets hot, it gets cold, it gets snowed on, and so on. And the water goes in and out every day, twice a day. So basically, it's a good place to live because there's lots of food, especially on algae-rich rocky shores. You've got lots of habitat. You can see here, this is up near Durham, actually, on the east coast, Black Hole rocks. And you can see here, you've got rock pools, you've got crevices, boulders, bedrock fissures, lots of seaweed, which means lots of invertebrates for food. So basically, if you can hack it, then it's a good place to live. It's a great place to hide from your predators, especially if you're a juvenile. You probably know, any of you who've done any tropical work, how important things like mangroves are for juvenile fish. Well, shores are the same thing in many ways. It's a good place to live when you're young and your larger predators don't dare to come up on the shore. And actually, you guys are quite lucky because you're down in one of the areas with the richest biodiversity and abundance of shorefish. So Devon, Cornwall, Isles of Scilly, South Wales, South West Ireland, all excellent places to look for intertidal fish. So let's go on and look now at where to find your fish, where and how to find your fish. I'm assuming that most of you had a go at doing this. The obvious thing is that you're going to get the most down on the lower shore, and you're going to get the least higher up, because higher up you've got to stay out of water, or there is no water, very much water for a long time. So I would always start going down to the bottom of the shore, working back up as the tide's receding, perhaps in the last hour or so, turn around, come back up again. So that's pretty obvious, really. As an example, though, of the fact you find rocky shorefish in particular right high up, as well as right low down, I've put in Montagu's blenny. I suspect many of you may have seen this, although it's fairly small, difficult to see. And it specializes really in managing to live in higher rocky shore pools. Just since we are talking ID at the moment, I'll also point out that this is one of the blennies, the only blenny that you're going to find on the shore that has joined head tentacles. So you can see it's got a lovely little frill on the top of its head, just there. And even when you can't see the fish all that clearly, like this one down here, that little frill shows up. But this one likes to live high up on the shore where fewer others can. Now that's a typical habitat. Coralline algae way high up on the shore. Can you see one? There is one there somewhere. Right in the middle there. That is a little Montagu's blenny sitting in a typical coralline pool habitat. So well worth looking at the top of the shore as well as the bottom. In contrast, choosing another blenny in this case, our lovely tompot blenny that most of you will be familiar with. I've never seen one of these on the shore, but they apparently do occur in very low shore pools. So that's at the other extreme. It's generally found in shallow water down to 10, 20, maybe even 30 meters, but certainly not as adults very often on the shore. Maybe again, somebody can tell me later on if they have ever seen one an adult on the shore. So we know where we're going to go and look. The first thing I would do as soon as I got down to a pool, for example, is I would approach very quietly and have a look, just as you would do with birds or any other wildlife. Go and have a quiet look without casting your shadow on the pool, and you would be quite surprised at what you can actually find. So this is a pool, the previous shot and this one was a pool in Aberystwyth on the shore there with a porcupine group. And just peering quietly into this pool on the way to the site, actually, there was a whole little shoal of sprat. And I would never have spotted those if I marched up to the pool and shoved my net straight into it. They're quite difficult to tell apart from herring and other little silvery fish. I thought at first they were sand smelt because of this lovely little line along the side, but no, it turns out that these are actually sprat, and it doesn't show very clearly here, but where that red line is shows the relationship between the single dorsal fin and the anal fin right below it. And in herring, that would be different. Juvenile herring, that would be different. But anyway, have a look into the pools before you start. Next best thing to do, because some of these identifications are quite difficult, is to take a photograph if you possibly can. And I find, this is Paula Lightfoot here. She takes lovely photos, and she's got one of these little underwater cameras, as I have, which just go down to 10 or 15 meters. You can dip them into rock pools and so on and get a photograph. A photograph is so useful. However bad it is, you may well be able to tell afterwards, if not at the time, what that fish was. Just like those sprat I just showed you. I honestly thought they were sand smelt to begin with, until I looked carefully at the photos. This is a photograph taken with one of those little cameras, and I'm simply standing in the water about calf level, something like that, maybe up to my knees, clear water. And I thought there would be some little gobies here. So I just waited and eventually saw one dart around, and then put the camera very gently into the water and took the photo. And you can see just about that is a painted goby. It's got these nice little spotted rows of spots along the dorsal fins, the two dorsal fins. So camera's brilliant. Of course, if you are looking for rockpool fish, you would think of nets and rockpools. There's Doug. Hello, Doug. I can see you in the background there with your bucket. And getting into a big pool like this with a net, or even with a mask and snorkel, can be very rewarding. But fish are not stupid, and as soon as they feel the vibrations, you get in the water, or your net does, they're going to go undercover because they think you're a bird coming to eat them. So netting isn't always the answer, but it can be very useful. I tend to use a variety of sizes, including a tiny little aquarium net, because then you can get in amongst the crevices with it. Nets are the best way to catch fish that never come out of the water, i.e. they've got to be in rock pools. They can't live out of the water. This is a classic one, cork-wing wrasse, a juvenile, and that was on our trip up down to Swanage recently with porcupine, and just dipping the net in where I thought there might be one lurking under the seaweed, and up comes a little cork-wing. Stick it in a tray. This is actually a takeaway food tray, very useful, or a white tray, and then you can get your photograph, and then you can release it back into the pool. Same thing applies to things like sea sticklebacks. This one I just caught wading through a very deep rock pool and using a little net. But you'll never find those happily out of water. Sandy shores, sandy pools, shallow estuaries. This is what's it called? The Gamel, I think, in North Cornwall. A net like this could be very useful, and that's how you catch these juvenile flatfish and so on, and gobies as well, sand gobies and so on. This was one we caught by that method. And this is actually a sand sole. These are tiny, these are juveniles. So again, we're talking half a finger length, something like that, pretty tiny. The shape shows you it's a sole because it's oval in outline. And it's got this funny little moon-shaped mouth there. And if you turn it over on the underside, you can see it's got a lovely little rosette-shaped nostril, which tells you it's a sand sole rather than a Dover sole or any of the others. So you can tell the differences with practice between some of these juvenile fish as well as the adults. Of course, sometimes you bring up something slightly more interesting. We were finding quite a few weavers when we were wading around in this particular sandy area. Luckily, we were all wearing shoes or wetsuit booties. Of course, this is a lesser weaver, a juvenile, small one, but you can see that venomous black fin on the back. And lesser weavers are quite common in the sandy shallows. You get people stung every year. I'm sure most of you know this, but just for your interest, the solution to this, if you do get stung by one or you see someone, is to stick your foot in hot water, hot as you can bear, and it takes the pain away because it denatures the protein of the venom. And I've actually done this for somebody once with it was actually a ray in the tropics, a stingray in the tropics, and it worked a dream. He was in agony 1 minute and sitting there chatting another with his foot in hot water. It's worth knowing anyway. Okay, so you've got the netting method, the looking method, the photographing method, the netting method. This is the porcupine method. Get a whole group of enthusiasts, take them down to a rocky shore and give them free rein. Obviously, we are very careful on these trips to return all the rocks exactly as they were and so on, not disturb the shore too much. But this is a great way of finding rocky shore intertidal fish. Turning boulders, turning cobbles, lifting seaweed, not necessarily in rock pools by any means, and you will almost always be rewarded with something like a beautiful butterfish, one of my absolute favorites. It really lives up to its name, and it's almost impossible to lift one up except with a net. They are so slippery, no scales, and very slippery. And look at that beautiful teardrop line down from the eyes. This was another boulder I lifted, and lo and behold, there is at least two, or there are at least two butterfish. There's one, very clear spots, and there's another one, dark, much darker, with hardly any spots showing. So that's another sort of thing you have to look out for, variations. Also, a little worm pipefish under there as well. So this was obviously an extremely good rock, space underneath it, and nice and damp. And you can even see there, if I can get my pointer to work, you can even see little crabs and things also in the picture. Another very common shorefish that you'll find that doesn't mind too much being out of water, but prefers to stay in the pool, I have to say, is the long-spined sea scorpion. And in this one, you can see very clearly the long spine there. You can't see its mouth barbel very well, but we're going on to ID later on, so I'll cover that then. So turn over rocks, look under seaweed, lie down in the damp, kneel down, get down there at their level and have a search. So I put this one in because there's another little technique that I found, which I call fish whispering, because you've got the horse whisperer and the dog whisperer and so on. Why can't we be fish whisperers? So if I catch a shanny, for example, particularly shannies, and I want to take its photograph, I will get it in my net, hold it in my hand in the dark, put it where I want it to be for the photograph, and keep my hand over it covered so it's in the dark for maybe at least 10 seconds, 15 seconds, take my hand away really, really slowly, and it will just stay there. It just will not move. And you can get a good photograph that way. And it's almost every single time I found that this works. It doesn't hurt the fish. It has no scales. You're not going to knock the scales off. And so it's worth a try. So we've looked at where we might find the fish, how we might find them, what they are. What about how on earth they manage to actually live on the shore? What adaptations have they got? You can simply live in a rock pool, rather like that corkwing, that juvenile corkwing. You've got to be a bit tolerant of changes in salinity and temperature and so on. Or of course, you can just move in or out, up and down with the tides, in which case you're not really a truly intertidal fish. You can not live in a rock pool at all. You can just stay damp, hide under the seaweed, as we've just been looking, and the rocks. And in this case, you need to be able to breathe through your skin. And the shanny I showed you and the butterfish are both able to do this. They don't have any scales. Not having any scales also helps them to scramble and wriggle between the pools, so they can actually move between pools and between hidey holes. So that's a really useful thing to be able to do when the tide's out. And of course, you can have a sucker and cling on tightly when the tide's coming in and out. You can hide in crevices if it's very rough and so on. So that's a few of the most obvious adaptations that many rocky shorefish have. You can also know your territory and where home is, and that allows you to guard your eggs and really not go very far away at all. One of the fish that has been shown to have homing abilities is that shanny. They can actually find their way home from quite a long way away if they're experimentally removed, as it says in all the papers, i.e. picked up and unceremoniously put somewhere else. There he is, the shanny. Really, really remarkable abilities that they're discovering, possibly even ability to navigate using magnetism. But there's a few papers out at the moment about that sort of thing. So there we are. It's got a slimy scaleless skin, which allows the oxygen to be absorbed. It's got large eyes near the top of its head to look for predators. And although you can't see it here, because I've hypnotized it again, it can prop itself up on its pelvic fins, so it can look around both for prey and for predators. And it's got very large pectoral fins and a large tail. And if you disturb one of these things, you can see it skittering away using both these sets of fins. So it can get out of the way pretty quick. So that's a good intertidal fish. And of course, I've just been saying, it can find its way home when it wants to. And they are territorial to a large degree. Another example of a very well adapted shorefish is the shore or Cornish clingfish. Now, not surprisingly, this has suckers on its underside. I don't have a photograph of that sucker, but I'll show you a goby sucker in a minute. Just whilst we're about it, just notice with this clingfish, both the blue spots and these little tentacles here, which help you identify it and tell it from some of the other clingfish species. So the clingfish has got a lovely flattened low profile for squeezing under rocks, and very often you'll find them actually attached in spaces underneath boulders and rocks. And it's got its pelvic fins, as I say, shaped like a sucker. And I'll show you that on this goby. This is a rock goby, and all the gobies also have their pelvic fins shaped as a sucker. If I turn this fish over, there you go. There's that lovely sucker on the underside. So that takes us through, it's about half an hour. So that takes us through the sort of bit where I wanted to talk about the ecology, the wheres and the whys of intertidal fish. It's only an introduction, obviously. But I think we'll move on now and we'll talk about identifying fish. Now, you're not going to find a John Dory in a rock pool or on a shore, but I put it in because as far as I'm concerned, identifying fish, the very first thing you're going to look at is the shape. And if you have a shape like a John Dory, you couldn't be mistaken for anything else at all. A flat dinner plate with a punk hairdo. I mean, you just couldn't miss it. But what else then? We've got the general shape. That's what you're going to look at first when you're identifying fish. Then you're going to look at the fins, particularly the dorsal fins, the ones on the back, and the tail. And you want to know the number of dorsal fins, and you want to know the shape of the tail. Obviously, they only have one tail. The lateral line, that's that lovely line that runs along the side of many fish and that has a function in detecting vibrations and in shoaling and such things like that. The lateral line shape is not so useful in shorefish as an ID feature, but its shape, whether it's straight or curved and so on, is very important in identifying some other fish. It's worth looking at the eyes, whether they're on the side, very high up, whether they're big, whether they're small, and so on. Mouth, it's worth looking at, whether it's got an equal ending mouth or an underslung mouth or one top lip longer than the bottom lip and so on, that sort of thing. And of course the markings. Colour is okay, but it's often variable, as I hope we're going to see a bit later on. But markings can be pretty useful. Now, one other thing, the size, of course, although we have to remember juveniles on the shore, because very often you've got juveniles living on the shore, not the adults. Those of you who've either heard me talk about identifying fish before or are very observant will notice that, ignoring the general shape there, the beginning of each of those sentences spells F-L-E-M-M-S, the FLEMS system, which was devised by somebody called Peter Stebbings many, many, many years ago for helping divers to identify fish underwater and remind them what they needed to look for. So we know we're going to be looking for particular shapes of fish, and then we're going to be looking at more details of their anatomy. But the point of looking at the shape is to be able to identify them into families. So you'll be able to say, oh yes, it's an eel, it's a rockling, it's a bullhead, it's a wrasse, even if you can't do the species. And these are the major intertidal fish families. There are a few others making up that 50 or so, 40, 50 or so species. Eels, rocklings, clingfish, sticklebacks, pikefish, bullheads, that's things like sea scorpions, wrasse, blennies, and gobies, particularly the last two. So let's take a fish, in this case, a wrasse. So we're looking at the wrasse family. It's fish-shaped. That's okay. It can be fish-shaped, it can be normal fish-shaped. But look at the rest of that fish and just think for a minute what you would say characterizes that particular fish family. So I'll just give you a few seconds to look at that. And then I'll bring up what I think are the characteristic features of wrasse, whether they're British wrasse, tropical wrasse, Mediterranean wrasse, whatever. Okay. Thick lips. I call them Mick Jagger lips. Most wrasse have thick lips, and particularly this, the ballan wrasse. One long continuous dorsal fin. Okay, it gets a bit higher at the end, but it's one long fin. Big scales, and they're usually bicolored like this with the central bit marked out. It's particularly obvious in this one because this is an adult male ballan wrasse. It's not always quite so obvious, but big colourful scales. Colourful, there you go. And finally, although it doesn't show very well here, wrasse have a convex shaped tail. So if a fish has got all those characters, it's pretty likely that it's going to be a wrasse. So you're halfway there, you know it's a wrasse, then you can go down to looking at the species. There's another one. Has it got the same? Well, you can't see the tail, unfortunately, very well. but it's got the thick lips, it's got the single dorsal fin, it's got the colourful scales, and in fact, it is also a ballan wrasse. And I put that in particularly because most books show the previous slide, most books show that one, which is the unusual coloration of an adult male. And I know you can't tell adult males in all instances because they don't always have this colour, but fish that are this colour are always males. And I say that only because that's what I did my PhD on, and I hated killing these animals, but it turned out that always these were males. But what about that one? Now that's to confuse you. That also is a ballan wrasse, but it's a juvenile ballan wrasse, and you'll commonly find these in spring and early summer in rock pools, particularly in the south. I used to work on them in the Isle of Man, and there were lots there as well. And they very often have this bright green colour. Presumably, although this one isn't, presumably it helps camouflage if they're in amongst brown and green seaweeds. So juveniles can confuse you with the colour. Other British wrasse. So looking at those 4, of which 3 can be found in rock pools, not the cuckoo generally, and particularly the cork-wing, that's the most common one on rock pools. Do they have the same features? Yep, most of them have got thick lips. However, the rock cook, so this one down here, is also called the small-mouthed wrasse, and it does not have these, well, it's got fairly thick lips, but it's a very small mouth. But otherwise, yep, fairly prominent lips, definitely colourful scales, one long dorsal fin, convex tail, shows up quite well there. So these are all wrasse. And as I say, it's the cork-wing that you are most likely to find on the shore. Sometimes with a group of animals, of fish, you can get a clue from their behaviour as to which family they belong to, and also sometimes to which species. So I've always found that wrasse are pretty curious animals. Cuckoo wrasse will come up and inspect you, ballan wrasse sometimes, gold shannies, that bottom right, almost always, particularly if you sort of flash a white hand or a camera at them, they'll come and see what's going on. Rock cook, top left, tend to ignore you. They're not very interested at all. This does vary with how used they are to divers in this case, because this is underwater. Doesn't apply quite so well to looking at them in rock pools. So that was wrasse, or wrasses, really. Another group you're inevitably going to find on the shore are rocklings. So characteristics of this, eel-shaped, 2 dorsal fins, but it always looks initially as though they've only got one, because you've got one long dorsal fin at the back there, going all the way along. But here, hidden in a groove, is the second dorsal fin, which has one long bit at the front, doesn't show very well here, and pretty short filaments otherwise. And this is fascinating. If you put one into a tray like this and watch it, that ripples constantly. And I have yet to find a sensible explanation for that. And I don't know whether Doug has, whether it's sensing things or getting oxygen when they're in low oxygen water or what. I really don't know. We can find out maybe from him later. And of course, rocklings have barbels around the mouth. That's what you're going to look for when you're trying to identify the rocklings on the shore. So here is a 5-bearded rockling. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you can just see where the red arrow is, you can see the 5th. Mostly they confuse you, like that one, that is a 5-bearded, but it's hidden the 5th one, which is on its chin. It's bent it back, just doesn't show up. So you have to be really quite careful. So that one is the 5-bearded rockling, which is one of the 2 common species on the shore. And that one is the shore rockling. It's not called a 3-bearded rockling, that's something else that's found in deeper water. But the shore rockling too has 3 of these barbels. And that's what you really need to look for, 1, 2, 3, when you find a rockling on the shore. It's unlikely to be any of the other three, but it might be. Just to confuse you even further, this also is a rockling, but this is a juvenile. And sometimes you get pools full of these things after they've settled out of the plankton. For some, I don't know, again, why it's called a mackerel midge. I suppose it's got a resemblance to a mackerel and it's fairly midget-like, but that's all I can think of. This completely different colour, but you can just see those features, little barbels, the hidden first dorsal fin and the obvious second dorsal fin. The colouring is totally different because these things live in open water, up in deep rock pools or offshore, and therefore they've got this cryptic coloration, the pale belly and the dark back, to try and counter, it's called counter illumination, to try and hide them from below and above from predators. Okay, a pipefish, the pipefish family. Obvious characters. These things are encased in armor, basically. You can just about see it here. Almost a box-like armor, no scales, but a box-like armor. And that makes them very stiff. So they're long, they're thin, and they've got a stiff body. They've got this amazing tubular mouth for sucking in tiny little crustacean prey. And they've got tiny little fins, just like their relatives, the seahorses, very small fins and a tiny tail fin. This one I took in an aquarium because I find them really hard to photograph underwater. So you might find this one, this is the greater pipefish, because it's got a great bulge on its head. But it's not very particularly common on the shore. Far more common, and the one you're most likely to find, is this, the worm pipefish. And this, strangely, doesn't feel the same as the others. It doesn't have that angular body shape. It is actually rounded, and perhaps it's less armored. But it's still got that little tiny tubular mouth and very tiny fins. If you do catch one of these, do turn it over gently and look on the underside, and you may well see the brood pouch if it's a male, because of course the males carry the eggs. So you may find the brood pouch underneath with eggs in it. Blennies. This is what you're, I'd be very surprised if you didn't find a blenny on almost any decent seashore that you visited. Long bodies, one long dorsal fin, the prop-like pelvic fins that I've talked about, the eyes high on the head and the prominent head tentacles, except the shanny does not have head tentacles. So the commonest blenny on the shore that is the shanny, and it does not have head tentacles. All the others do. However, supposing you find one of these, this is about fingernail length, it's tiny. And actually, Doug, this was with you on those Black Hall rocks up in Durham where we found these. And they confused me for a while, but it does have some blenny-like features, including the shanny's very big pectoral fins. So you will.
Sorry to come in.
Yeah, do.
I get quite a few reports of baby flying fish found in rock pools.
Yes, that's right.
And actually, the first one, which I found when I was with Peter Ray at Polzeth, was a young gurnard.
Right.
And it's only if you get the head in profile,
yeah,
and it's convex in a blenny and concave in a gurnard,
right,
that you're clear.
Yeah,
It's always useful you can get photos from the side as well as from above.
Absolutely. Although, you know, the size of this thing and the camera without a microscope, difficult. But yes, I've been sent similar photos saying similar things. There's the adult. You can just see the similarities in shape, even in the juvenile. So gobies. Now, this group is difficult. There's no question about it. But on the shore, there are a limited number of species that you're likely to find, and this is the most likely. So gobies, they have again a long body, just like a blenny, but it's rounded, but there are two dorsal fins. Blennies sometimes have a dip in the middle of their dorsal fin, but not two separate ones like this. And unlike blennies, they do have a sucker on the underside if you can get the fish in a net and have a look. This is a rock goby, classic rock goby. Some of the features to look for, not always visible, is a pale or orange or yellow outline to certainly the first dorsal fin, sometimes the second. It's a chunky one and it has scales. I mean, it's difficult to see this, but you would if you had it really close, that reach almost up to the eyes. So a big patch of scales there. Other gobies. Okay, so there's your rock goby up on the left. That's the most common one you're going to find. If you're lucky, you might find a painted goby, as I showed you earlier on with that photograph where I dipped the camera in the water. And they don't mind the shore, but they don't generally live there. And if they do live there, it's got to be this sort of habitat, shelly, stony sort of habitat in a pool. Beautiful picture, of course, by Paul Kay, who takes wonderful photographs. With a male displaying all those breeding colours. They don't always look as obvious as that. The bottom one is the most unusual of all the gobies that we get, and that is because it is not benthic except in winter. So it doesn't live on the seabed like these others. It swims up in the middle of the water in a rock pool or up amongst the kelp or whatever in slightly deeper water. They are annoying little things because they don't always have two spots, usually only in the breeding season, but they do swim around in little groups like this. So you can tend to be able to recognize them. In winter, they go and settle down on the seabed.
I have found one inside the holdfast of a kelp.
Ah, brilliant. I wonder it wouldn't be able to swim very far. Perhaps it was it winter?
It was a porcupine trip, but I think it was Galway. So that was what, September?
Porcupines don't come out in winter, so it can't have been that. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so that actually takes us through to the beginning of the bit where you lot are going to do the work, hopefully. It's only just before 10 to, so I'll start on this and then perhaps Robin will tell us when we ought to stop, basically. This is a rock pool way high up above tide level, but I still found blennies and things in it. So any rock pool is worth exploring. Right, practice. First of all, books. So during the break, you might want to go away and any books that you've got, you might want to bring them over to see if that will help you. Variety of books, Paul Kay and Mai's Marine Fish of Wales, of course, Field Key. Now, this second one, the Field Key to the Shore Fishes of the British Isles, it's a tiny little book. It's a reprint from a paper and it's quite old and it's black and white, but it is an actual key and he has some very useful notes. He says things like, bass, young fish are common in the surf zone of sandy beaches and juveniles occasionally occur in tidal pools on sandy shores as a result of strandings. So it's worth getting hold of a copy of that if you can. A book I love is this Europe and Mediterranean Marine Fish Identification Guide. It was in French, but the 2015 one's in English, and it's a great supplement, and it covers Great Britain as well. The newest one seems to be Peter Henderson's Identification Guide. That is mostly dead fish, but he has some very useful statistics in it. Extra things like fin ray counts and scale counts and some good photos as well as some rather bad ones, but those are because they're dead, you know. Of course, Paul Naylor's Great British Marine Animals, lovely, got some beautiful photographs in that, and his newest one's just come out. And then in about the end of next year, 2022 or early 2023, the new Sea Search Guide to Inshore Fishes is coming out. Lynn Baldock, myself and Paul Kay are producing this. And we haven't got very far yet, but it will be done on time. I think we're actually going to have a contract, so we'll have to do it on time. So that one, hopefully, will also be a good guide. So here's your first one. 3 eel-like fish. And I'm just going to leave that on the screen. You can unmute yourselves if you wish to. Given a couple of minutes, you might sort of be able to tell me which one, if any, you've been able to identify. So I'll just leave that up there for the moment.
I think, hello, Francis.
Hi, Nicola.
I think this is a pipefish, a worm pipefish, because it's rounded and it's got the long tubular mouth.
Yeah, on the right, on top right.
On the right, yeah. Oh, you can't see me moving, sorry.
I know.
And the bottom one, I think, is a butterfish,
Yeah.
because of the spots.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure about the top left.
Okay, so anybody got...
Is it an eel?
Yes, it is an eel. It is an eel. What sort of eel?
Perhaps it's a very juvenile conger,
It could have been.
but it isn't. A silver eel.
Yeah, it is. It's the common eel. I don't know if my pointer will show it, but there's the beginning of the dorsal fin, and it's way back on the body. If it was a conger, it would be just behind the pectoral fins there, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. And juvenile, these sort of small eels, common eels, and bigger ones, you get quite a lot on the shore. It's quite interesting. Yeah, you're quite right about the pipefish and the butterfish. Beware with butterfish, because as I showed before, these characteristic white-rimmed black spots do not always show. You can get ones that are nearly yellow, you can get ones that are nearly black. So you need to be a bit careful with those.
In Scilly, those are called either 9 eyes or 10 eyes.
Ah, lovely. I love the vernacular names. It's lovely. Okay, well done. Okay, so I just took this from British Sea Fishing just to show that what I was just saying a bit more clearly. So the conger eel with have I got it the wrong way around? No, I haven't. Yeah. Thank goodness for that. The common eel with the fins starting a long way back, and the conger eel with it beginning just behind the pectoral fins. Now, if you think you don't find conger eels on the shore, you're wrong. It's unusual. Most of those eels will be common eels. This is a trip down to Dale we did last year, 2020, with porcupine, and a lady called Kate Locke, who's a great marine biologist. Her son and his friends have got really into fish watching, which is brilliant for young people. And they found in this bucket here, and actually it's been on telly, I think, that bucket is full of conger eels of various sizes, extracted from this big pile of rocks that goes all the way up here. These guys just know how to find these things. And that'd be another one of my hints. If you're getting to my sort of age, when you go looking for intertidal fish, take a child with you, because they're more bendy and they can get down there and they can catch the fish more easily. So that's your classic conger eel, of course, head sticking out the rock, tubular nostrils, which you can see there, and the fin beginning just behind the pectoral fins. So that would be on the shore. You could find that if you had a big pile of rocks like that one I just showed you. Anybody spot another fish? Nothing to do with intertidal fish, but anybody spot another fish in that photo? It's one of Keith's from a long time ago.
Yes, I can.
Oh yes, leopard
it's just
spot.
on the
little ridge there.
Yes, on the ridge.
Well spotted. A goby, and in fact, even though it's so far away, you can see its shape. Its eyes right up high. Its pectoral fins that's propping itself up, and although mostly that's blennies, maybe not the two dorsal fins. That's a leopard spot goby, which you don't. Well, I've never seen one on the shore.
Yes.
You have you? Right.
It was, I think, a porcupine meeting at St Agnes in Cornwall.
Oh, right.
And they certainly went down at St Agnes, and one of the locals said he regularly found them in rock pools there, big rock pools.
Wow.
And he produced one for us.
Fantastic. So there's another one to add to the list.
On the conger,
yeah.
Last BioBlitz, that'll be kind of September 2019 down at Wembury.
Yep.
On the sand, thrashing around, was a conger, but with the last third of its body missing.
Good. All right. Well, here's your next challenge. In that case, got your books to the fore. Let's see what you can do with this one. You've had all coffee break.
Yes,
Oh,
I've been looking at all my photos, and
Right.
is it a clingfish?
It's a very, very good guess, but it's not. I mean,
Not.
no, it's not.
So,
No,
A
it's
Montague sand snail, isn't it?
Hey,
ooh,
well done. It's that lovely tadpole shape. And also when you find them on the shore, the fact that it curls its tail round like that, it almost, I don't think I've seen a single one sort of stretched out on the seashore anyway. And it's not always this color. There's another sea snail, but that's mostly found deeper. I'd be surprised to find one on the shore. But Montague's, this was Boggle Hole in Yorkshire that I found this one.
why is it called sea snail?
Good question.
It's a very good question. I have no idea what to be called sea tadpole because the shape, it is tadpole shaped, isn't it? But no idea. No idea.
Wonderful markings on. Lovely.
They're beautiful, but they're not always that colour, unfortunately.
No, the
And-
ones we've seen have always been plain coloured. They've had very little mottling on like that. It's just the shape that's given them away.
Exactly.
Found them at Lee Bay.
Absolutely agree. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think they've had quite a lot of the common sea snail, the other species,
Yes.
turning up on the filters at the Hinkley Point Power Station.
Oh, have they? That's interesting. And sometimes they call them striped because often they are striped, but they're not always. That's interesting. Right.
sorry, how big are they?
Oh, sorry, go back again. That is probably a juvenile and it's pretty small. That's about my thumb, I suppose, if you stretch his tail out.
Thank
Something like that. But they grow a bit bigger. I've forgotten the exact size, but they're not big. They're not big fish by any means.
Do the adults have a similar pattern on the?
I can't answer that because I haven't seen one, an adult. I've only seen these juveniles.
Right.
There's a few books we might look in.
I've never seen.
I think often they're darker, the adults, as far as I remember.
Right.
Let's move on to.
What a fantastic.
Right, this one's probably pretty obvious, and it's the juveniles you're going to see on the shore usually, except at extreme low water. This is one of Paul Kay's.
Up at the Dove Marine Laboratory had quite a number, it was about May time, of males nesting on the shore.
Right.
Yeah, I can see big lips. Is that right?
Yeah, they've got big lips. Yeah, indeed it has, but it's not a wrasse.
Is it a wolffish?
No, we do know it could be. I love wolffish, but you won't find them on the shore.
No, they're too deep.
A lump sucker.
Yay.
Ah.
Lump sucker.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lump sucker, and you can see all the lumps basically. So when it develops, it starts off normal, but the fin along the back gradually gets grown over by this flesh, and it develops all these lumps and bumps and prickles and warts and things like that, and gets to be rather well, I was going to say ugly, but it's not ugly. It's probably very pretty to another lump sucker. And the juveniles you get in the pool look like little swimming green, often green balls, basically. But they're lovely. And as somebody said, Doug just said, I think, nesting. So they have a sucker on the underside, and the males guard the eggs, which the female has laid on a rock somewhere, often on or in the surf zone of the shore, sometimes below. And of course, this is the pretend caviar that we eat. This is lumpfish caviar when you take the eggs from them. The other interesting thing about these is they're being used now and grown in nurseries as cleaner fish. So they also act as cleaner fish, rather like some wrasse do. So, okay, so well done. I think that was Ruth, wasn't it? Got that one?
Yes.
Great, well done. There you go. Now this one's a bit more tricky. I think it's a bit unfair of me to put this one in because this is a northern and eastern species. So you won't necessarily have come across it. And I included it because some fish don't occur in the south that do in the north. What does the shape remind you of? Which it's not going to be the same family, but which family does it remind you of? Long and thin.
So we're talking something reminiscent of an eel.
Yeah, it is eel-like actually. It's a bit blenny-like as well, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It looks. It isn't a true blenny.
Is it a snake blenny?
That's another good guess, but they are really thin.
Oh.
Is it a rockling?
Now that's the thing it looks most like, I would say, but it's got no barbels.
No.
And it's got one long dorsal fin, and it hasn't got that dip, you know, that little first dorsal fin in the dip. I'll probably tell you in a second, because it's not an easy one at all. In fact, I've never seen one. Let's go. There you go. It's a northern and eastern species. Now my screen, of course, doesn't show it properly because I've got this pause mute jobby above it. But can you read the name there?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Viviparous blenny or eel pout. Okay, so this is a northern and eastern species. It's one of those group of fish that's often grouped with blennies, but it's a different family. So they're not what we would call true blennies. And there's several families of not quite true blennies. And this is actually, it's like its name says, it's a viviparous species. It has live young, which I think is fascinating. It's one of the reasons I like it. ID wise, if you do find a photo of it, that mouth with that sort of raised upper lip is so characteristic. And it's got this pattern here around its eyes as well, but I've never seen a live one.
It looks a different colour to the one in Paul Naylor's book.
Yeah, exactly. Now this is the whole problem with fish. That's the colour can be very variable, and a lot of shore fish can actually change their colours to suit their background as well for camouflage purposes. And sometimes it depends on the picture. You know, the camera will take a different colour picture to but yeah.
Yeah. Has it ever been seen in southwest England?
Not as far as I know. It's not been found in Wales, I know that. I don't think it's been found in the southwest. So it is essentially a northern species.
Northern species.
Yeah. So you'd find it in things like there's a book about northern Norway species and things like that. You'd find it in those sort of books.
It's fished commercially in the Baltic, according to this book by Paul Kay and Francis Dipper.
Trouble is, I can't remember everything I've written. No, that's correct. Yes. So it is a northern Baltic.
Yeah, northern species, right.
Right, here's a challenge. This is what you often see. But in fact, once you know the answer, you'll see the obvious. Look at the tail and the tail stalk. And think of which fish could be as long and thin as that. I'll show you the other end in a minute.
Pipefish.
A which, sorry?
Pipefish.
A pipefish. That's also could easily have been, but the tail is too big.
Could it be a wrasse?
No.
Are we talking, Francis, about is it 10-spine stickleback, the marine stickleback?
The marine stickleback, the sea stickleback. So there's the front end of it, and you can see extremely characteristic. You can't see, and I'm not sure I've got my pointers. There we are. You can't see the spines along there, but it has a variable number from, I think it's 9 to 15 or something. I'd have to look that up. There's a lot of spines there. Then it's got this very characteristic high fin at the back. Sorry, my pointer keeps disappearing. Oh, well, never mind. And then, of course, it's got this tail with this wonderful sort of, I don't know, it's almost like a fan, isn't it, at the end of the tail there? And so, yeah, 10-spine, sea stickleback. We also get 3-spine stickleback on the shore as well. And then there's another, yeah, go on.
Sorry, yeah, 15-spine, this one's generally called. But I have actually once had a 9 or 10-spined in a rock pool in Plymouth Sound.
That's quite unusual. They
I
are-
always thought that was the only freshwater one, because three-spine you get regularly on the shore, but actually once there's a paper in the Biologist about the stickleback saying that all of them found on the shore, but the 9 or 10 is very unusual.
Really unusual, because I've just found them on a pond dipping session I ran recently in the middle of Cambridgeshire, and that's their normal sort of habitat. So yeah, I agree. Right, so so you will find that was on the Farne Islands in a pool with lots of seaweed quite high up on the shore. Sea stickleback, Spinaccia spinaccia. You also get nests. Now, mostly those are in shallow water. Anybody ever seen a stickleback nest on the shore? I haven't. This is a Lynn Bulldog picture. But that's what they do. They all of them build a little nest like this, in which the female or females lay their eggs. It's worth looking out for anyway. You might just think it was a tangle of seaweed and rope or something. Be interesting to know if we find any with plastic in them. Here's a couple for you. One's obvious, one not quite so obvious. One on the right we've had already. But the colour might put you off.
Well, until today, I would have thought it was a blenny, but it might not be. So
There's
It
a
is.
marking,
One on the right is a blenny. What sort of blenny is it?
marking on the crown, but look,
Shanny.
there.
It is a shanny, yes. I would look also, again, there we are. See this mark there? Quite a distinct dark mark behind each eye there. That's quite characteristic of the shanny. So yeah, so that's the shanny, but just a different colour. They're very variable. And one on the left.
Is it a scorpion?
Yeah, yeah. Sea scorpion, bullhead. And that is the long spine sea scorpion. Now you can't see in this photo the two little barbels, one on either side of the mouth, that this species has. But if we go to the next one, then you can. So again, it's a very variable colour. But look, see that little white barbel there in the mouth? There. Yes. There's two other species, a Norway one, which looks very similar and does have a barbel, but has other features. Never seen that on the shore. And the bull rout, or the big one. What would you call the big one in English? The short-spined, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah, you're on mute actually at the moment.
Short-spined sea scorpion.
Short-spined, yeah, yeah. But again, that's not.
By the way, sorry to interject yet again. Sorry to keep interrupting you. But I'm forever getting these reported to me as scorpion fish.
I know.
And scorpion fish is a totally different fish, which is incredibly rare in Britain.
I think
two species occur. One has been 4 records, good records. Somebody reported 12 from the Solent. So pretty certain they got that one wrong.
I think it's the name, Doug.
And otherwise, the red scorpion fish, probably 1 or 2 every 3 years.
Yeah.
But they're deeper water, venomous, and
exactly
rare.
I think it's simply the name. I think people don't think, and scorpion fish, sea scorpion, to them it's the same thing. It's why we ought to be using the scientific names, really. It's difficult.
Would you, Francis? Would you say that plan? Would you say that plan shape?
Yes.
Was indicative with the very broad head through to the gills, and then suddenly it narrowing.
Absolutely. I've always thought that's why they were called bullheads, because they've got such big, tough, triangular heads. So yes, looking down on it, absolutely. And they're very spiny. They've got spines along here and spines, of course, in the fins. So yeah, I would. Yeah, a great big fat body at the top and a thinner body behind.
Is the one in the inset more the normal colour you'd see, or are they just variable?
There isn't a normal colour. They match to match the background. I found them almost white in the chalk pools in Norfolk. and they can change completely from almost black to almost white. That little black one is almost imitating corallina, you know, the calcareous seaweeds, by having patches of pink. So they're very good at camouflage.
I've even seen a photo of one that was blue.
Really? What was the background?
I can't remember.
No, interesting. They did an experiment many years ago with, I think it was probably a place or maybe a flounder, putting it in a laboratory on a black and white checkered background, and it more or less managed to match that in checks. How they do it, I don't know. Brilliant. Right, now there, to show you, even more confusing, again, ignore the obvious one in the middle, which is the rockling, and look at the other two.
They go right back here.
Rockling.
Which, how many?
Rockling in the middle, yes.
Yep.
So you go rockling right in the middle. Where's my pointer gone? Won't come.
One's got barbels on its mouth.
Yeah, the one with the barbels is definitely a rockling.
This one.
But the other two.
It's a male shanny.
You think it's a male shanny?
Yes, somebody's just said it.
It's a male shanny.
Paula got it, not me.
Oh, he's very loyal, isn't he?
It's a male shanny in breeding condition. So they tend to go completely black when they're breeding with this white lips. And I've only seen this in the aquarium. I've seen it in the Plymouth aquarium with the males, that colour. And in the background, you've got a normal, could be female or male, or an immature male, something. So it's just occasionally you get these very black ones, which is the male saying, look how wonderful I am, you know. Male shanny in breeding colours. You've had this one already, but I thought I'd put it in.
Oh.
Hairy armpits.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely, and those are actually free rays of the pectoral fins. So you can see they're not attached by a membrane. But that's characteristic of several species in this family, but it's pretty obvious in this one. Now, one of the reasons it's difficult to tell this is because I'm looking straight down, and straight down views are difficult because you can't see the colour of the dorsal fin properly and so on, but often it's the only photograph you can get.
You can't see whether there's one or two either.
No, very difficult indeed to see that.
I think it's a rock goby.
Yes,
but
it is a rock goby.
It looks almost identical to the photograph I wanted to show you for ID help. So maybe I'm getting there.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely in that case.
So one of the good things you can see in that photo is the scales kind of on the head running down to the eyes pretty well.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's my point of finding. Absolutely, you can see them reaching right up to the head there, and that distinguishes it from some other of the sublittoral species like black goby and so on.
Black goby, you would see two dark lines of bristles just in front of the first dorsal fin.
Yeah, yeah.
In a good photograph, there's just parallel dark bristles just in front of that dorsal fin.
The thing with gobies, if we weren't dealing just with the shore, is that they are difficult. And this is one of Lynn Baldock's specialities. So when this Sea Search book comes out, she's got all the gobies beautifully illustrated with all the details of how to ID them. So hopefully it will be useful for all of us and for some of the biologists and scientists as well. But she's been working on those for quite a while. And that's the same. That is also a rock goby. And in this particular case, you can see just a little yellow edge to that fin there, and possibly a pale edge along there. Always present. Oops, wrong.
Of course, another one that has a pale edge is the giant.
Oh.
And I find the most distinctive feature of the giant is the fact it has a white edge to both dorsal fins and to the tail.
That's very interesting. I shall check that against whether Lynn's found that, Doug. That'll be very interesting to know if she's found that as well.
You know, it's chunky, it's salt and pepper.
Yeah.
But I find at first glance, the easy thing to tell is the white margin to both dorsal fins and to the tail. And I think the anal, if I remember correctly.
That's very interesting. They're not easy. They're not easy. And there is another one. This is not my picture. This is taken off the web, so therefore the quality is not that brilliant, but it does show you the features. And this is tricky.
Mm.
What sort of fish is it first? What family?
It's got really big lips.
Yeah.
And it's got that tail that you were talking about for wrasse, hasn't it?
Mm.
It has, but not the right sort of fin.
No.
Oh, the goby.
It is a goby, yeah. It's another goby. 2 dorsal fins, first one short. Lovely rounded tail, thick lips, eyes high up on the head, big pectoral fins. It's a goby. Doug's not allowed to do this one because he knows. It's very, very tricky. I shall tell you actually, and interestingly, what Doug was just saying about the white edge is visible here, which I've not noticed. Okay, little white edge. This is your rare giant goby.
Yeah.
Very rare. You're very unlikely to see one. You might. It's got an extremely chunky body, especially if you look there, the depth of that. Stalk. And this what they call salt and pepper, you know, black and white spots and things. I've never seen a live one. Anybody seen one? Because they're in your area.
So how big do they grow?
Oh, big.
They will go to 18 centimeters, but in fact, most are only, they're no bigger than, most I've seen, no bigger than a large rock goby.
No, I agree, on the shore, but I've got pictures of fishermen holding them, believe it or not, of nearly 30 centimeters.
Yeah.
It can be big, but it just depends. But that is a rare one. It is a protected species. So if you're looking at one, you mustn't know what it is, or it's illegal to handle it.
Yeah, my U3A group found one at Wembury.
I'm not surprised you get one at Wembury.
But I don't know that they didn't used to be known from the North Coast at all, but Matt Slater's found quite a few in North Cornwall, but I've never heard of one in North Devon.
Right. I think they're so difficult to ID, and they live right up the top of the shore. Again, they like, can you see the sort of entomorpha in the background? So they like green, pools with green seaweed right up the top of the shore. So the habitat would help.
I think in North Devon.
Most round here actually tend to be kind of mid-shore in rock pools over 1 meter deep.
Okay, so they don't obey the rules. Fair enough. Okay.
They haven't read your book.
No, they haven't read the book or anybody else's. No. Okay, well, that's another interesting thing.
And do you think in North Devon it could have been overlooked?
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
Almost anywhere they could be overlooked.
Yes.
Again, when we get this book out, we're going to try and show exactly where things like this have been found up to date, and that should help. Just knowing that a fish is only found somewhere particular does help, but you must never assume it, because the fish haven't been told they're not supposed to go somewhere else.
To me, the thing that seems striking about that is it's a brute, even compared to what I think of as a rock goby.
Yes, yeah, I agree. It is. It's a big thug. But as Doug says, also some of the rock gobies get pretty big, but they don't look chunky like that. Unfortunately, they both have this sort of stripy first dorsal spine, which is a shame, because that would have been a nice character if that was different between them. But it's not. But I'm most interested in that white line. Quite right, it shows up on there, but not in a dead fish. It wouldn't. Right, I think this one is my final one.
Tom Blenny.
Tom Pot.
Yes, you can't miss it, can you? You can't miss it. Absolutely gorgeous. Now, this is Paul Naylor's speciality, and those of you who know him, he's done so much work on them. And what I particularly like about this is that he, if you haven't read his books, he has identified individuals, followed their lives over several seasons, worked out their relationships with each other, and and where they live and how long they live there for. And this is a bit of a new science with fish, identifying individuals. They do it with whale sharks and stuff like that in the tropics, but marvelous to be able to do it with one of our own little local fish. So again, that's in Paul's book, all the individuals. Fantastic. I think, oh no, I just put a couple in just to confuse you. So looks like a tompot, doesn't it? But it's got a blue mark there, and these don't look as branched as in the other one. Well, before I confuse you further, it is a tompot. Oops, go back again. It is a tompot, a juvenile tompot, and juveniles often have this little blue mark here. But there's also another species called the red blenny, very similar, which in the males have a big, adult males have a big blue mark there, and they also have radiating red lines around the head. I've never seen one on the shore, but there is this thing called the red blenny, which is west and south, basically, in a few spots. So again, juveniles can be confusing. I think that's all I wanted to say about that. And finally, I just thought I'd show you a few non-shore species, just to show the same techniques work. So these were all taken actually in an aquarium, except the one on the right. And comparing them all like that, what would you say were the features of that family? Because they're all in the same family.
Barbels.
Barbels, but not all of them, yes.
3 dorsal fins.
3 dorsal fins, absolutely. And how many anal fins or ventral fins?
2. Yeah.
2. So 3 dorsal fins, 2 anal fins, often a barbel. It's going to be a gadoid, a member of the family Gadidae. And anybody put a name to any of them?
Cod.
Yeah. Cod, top right.
Is that poor cod? Top.
No,
bottom.
Yep.
Bottom.
Bottom left is a pouting, isn't it?
Yeah, bib or pouting, and somebody just said poor cod on the right.
Yes.
Exactly. And top left, less familiar.
Whiting.
No, there's 2.
Pollock.
No, they're not thin enough for those. It's quite a deep-bodied thing, and it's got this very characteristic black mark there and a very pointed first dorsal fin.
And the black lateral line.
Black lateral line, yeah. Been to a fish shop lately? You have cod and chips. What else do you have?
Whiting. Haddock.
Haddock. So that's haddock. Whiting, I could have put in there as well, absolutely, but we haven't. I just put it in to show you the sort of the same techniques work really, whether you're on the shore or not.
Francis, sorry, what was the name of the family?
It's the Gadidae, so the gadoids, G-A-D-I, D-I-D-A-E, Gadidae. The codfish.
Thank you.
Codfish or codfishes. Sometimes they're difficult to tell apart. This bottom picture of the greeny looking one, which is simply a colour, and it's not meant to be that colour, just from the picture. Sometimes it's difficult to tell things like pouting or bib from poor cod. And then if you've got a good picture, this is where it comes into its own. The middle one there, you can see that the black line, where's my pointer again? There we are. If you take a line from the bottom of the anal, that fin there, ventral anal fin, straight upwards, falls into the middle of that one, that first dorsal fin. Do that on a poor cod from the bottom of the first anal fin upwards directly, and it falls on the second dorsal fin. So you can see the relationship there.
Pouting have these stripes, don't they? Though?
Yeah, they are, but they fool you. Sometimes they're completely strikeless and golden brown, or even silvery, and even black almost sometimes. So that's why you sometimes have to do this and have a look at it. And I think, yeah, that's the last one. That's the last one. So if I do stop share,
That's our doorbell.
come back. And that gives us time for questions or time for people to show us photos, whichever. Over to you guys, basically.